Hello, hello, you big, beautiful world, you, and welcome to the podcast of Brothers of Many Words. I am your host, RP,
Co-host King Christopher.
King Christopher. We are down one king today. He has prior obligations. We surely will miss him, but we got him covered. We got him covered today, and he'll definitely be back on Tuesday. Open mic night. Open mic night. How you doing? How you doing, King?
I'm loving life. How are you, brother?
I'm doing pretty good. It's actually a beautiful day today. It was last few days have been raining quite a bit, but today sun is shining. It's a really beautiful day outside today.
Yes, it is. Yeah, we've had lots of storms as well.
Up there as well too. I know that's what
Oh, yeah.
King Mackey was saying.
Lots of rain, but the sun's out today and the flowers are starting to bloom.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Okay, so keep it moving with our affirmation. Our affirmation. So we stand together as brothers, united in purpose, grounded in respect. We move with love, speak with clarity, and carry peace in all we do. There is no ego here, no division, only growth, only elevation. Every voice matters, every presence has power. Together, we are building something greater than ourselves, something lasting. We are aligned in mind, spirit, and mission. We are ready. There's peace and energy. There's power in our unity. There's purpose in our message. And with intention and discipline,
Let it be done.
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And so we'll move right on into some inspiration. Inspiration to give you a little food for thought for the day to keep it positive. True success is not measured by what you accumulate, but by the clarity of your purpose, the strength of your character, and the peace you carry within. When your inner world is aligned, the outer world begins to reflect a life of meaning, growth, and lasting fulfillment. So pretty
Right
powerful
on.
words right there.
Yes, it is.
So this year, the origin is the origins of Africa, and this is the cover we'll be doing. And you can see that it's two different covers, same book, two different covers, two different covers. Pretty powerful book. This is the third part of this book that we have chopped it up into.
Episode number 3.
Episode number 3. Episode number 3. So with that being said, King Mackey would be going first today, but we got him covered, and Chris will be doing his part, and we'll be answering his question, and we'll just keep moving from there.
Right on. So I got Haru was the sections he was assigned was the Armana period, the Ramesside period, and Egypt and the Great Powers Club of the Ancient Near East.
Okay.
And we'll start with the first one. The Armana period. So the Armana period is one of the most unusual and disruptive moments in Egyptian history because it shows what happens when one ruler tries to fundamentally reshape religion, politics, and the public life all at once. So at the center of this period is Akhenaten, who pushed the worship of the Aten, the sun disk, above the traditional Egyptian gods. That was a massive break from the religious structure Egypt had lived under for generations. So this was not just a private spiritual preference. It affected the political order too, because religion, kingship, and the state power were all tied together in Egypt. So when Akhenaten elevated Aten and reduced the importance of the older gods like Amun, he was disrupting the old institutions and priesthood that was connected to him. So another major part of this period was his decision to move the capital of Armana, or the capital to Armana. That move definitely symbolized a clean break from the older political religious centers, and it showed that Akhenaten was not just adjusting Egyptian traditions, he was trying to redirect the center of Egyptian life around an entirely new vision. But that kind of dramatic shift also created instability because the system he was building depended heavily on his own personal authority. So what makes the Armana period so revealing is how short-lived it was. After Akhenaten's death, Egypt pretty much returned right back to its older beliefs under rulers like Tutankhamun, Haman, which is known as King Tut. That tells us that the changes were significant, but deeply rooted. They weren't deeply rooted enough like the older gods was to survive him. So the Armana period definitely stands as a powerful example of how bold reform can transform civilizations for a moment, but also how difficult it is to permanently replace traditions that are deeply embedded in the culture. And so the question that Haru sent us for this is, how did Akhenaten's religious changes affect Egypt's political stability during the Armana period?
Okay, so Akhenaten, from 1353 to 1336 BCE, he upended Egypt's religious system by elevating Aten above all other gods that you just had mentioned that as well. So, how did religious change undermine political stability? So, first of all, the centralizing power, then the hollowing of the system, closed or sidelined major cults, especially Amun, and redirected worship to Aten. It seized temple revenues and priestly authority, concentrated power in the crown. Short-term control for the king, but loss of experienced administration network. Priests, temples, estates that had long helped run Egypt's economy and provinces. The breaking of old traditions. Traditional temples were economic engines, that controlled the land, labor, and storage and redistribution. Their disruption fractured tax collection, land governance, and social services tied to the temples. As you mentioned, moving the capital to Armana, founded a brand new capital in Akhenaten to embody Atenism. Neglecting foreign affairs, the erosion of Egyptian influence abroad, the Levant and Syria, encouraging rebellion and opportunism by local rulers and enemies. So the social and ideological alienation effect was a loss of popular and elite buy-in, undermined the shared beliefs that legitimized kingship and social cohesion. So after his death, the whiplash after his death, figures rolled back Armana policies and recentered power at older sites. Rapid reversal highlights how fragile and destabilizing the experiment had been. The result was a period of political instability, quickly corrected after his reign, proving that in ancient Egypt, religious continuity was essential to state stability.
100%, man. And I mean, Akhenaten, I think his downfall was, I mean, he was kind of into himself,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And you can't lead a society that way, because he was all about him, didn't care about what anybody else thought, and he thought he was right. Totally forgot about the whole culture of the people he was actually leading.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That was his downfall. He didn't last very long.
No, he didn't.
All right, so the next topic we have is the Ramesside period. Um, so that the Ramesside period definitely represents both the strength of Egypt at its height and the early signs of the strain that would eventually contribute to its decline. This area especially was especially associated with strong rulers like Ramses II, who became one of the most famous pharaohs in history. He's remembered for military campaigns, monumental building projects, and for the projecting Egypt's power both inside and outside its borders. In many ways, this period reflects an Egypt that still saw itself as a dominant force in the area. One of the defining features of the Ramesside period was the conflict with major foreign powers, especially the Hittites. The Battle of Kadesh is one of the best known examples. It became a key part of Ramses II image as a warrior king, even though the political reality behind the battle was more complex than a simple one-sided victory. Ramesside definitely lied about his victory there and his abilities as a warrior.
Hmm.
Um, what matters there is that Ramses understood the power of reputation, though.
Hmm.
So through inscriptions and monuments, he shaped how Egypt's strength would be remembered. But this period is important for another reason as well. It shows that the great power and underlying weakness can exist at the same time. So on the surface, Egypt still looked very, very impressive. It had major rulers, military campaigns, huge construction projects, but maintaining that kind of empire required enormous resources, um, and also required stable leadership. So control over changing regional pressures. So the Ramesside period reflects a civilization that was still powerful, but already beginning to show the pressure that would matter later on. And that is why the era was not just the peak; it was also the turning point. Because Egypt still had power, but the conditions that sustained it was becoming harder to maintain. So the question we got for Haru sent us is, what did Ramses II play in shaping Egypt's military reputation and foreign relations?
So Ramesses II represented power, image, and diplomacy. Ramesses II, 1279 to 1213 BCE, shaped Egypt's military reputation and foreign relations through a blend of bold campaigning, powerful propaganda, and groundbreaking diplomacy. So his military reputation, as you just mentioned, the Battle of Kadesh, from risk to legend, fought the Battle of Kadesh against the Hittite Empire. And so, one thing about the Egyptians, they didn't want to look bad, as you mentioned, reputation. So anything bad that happened, especially concerning the Pharaoh, was not written down, if you will, hieroglyphically or anything in that regard. They always wanted to maintain that reputation as powerful.
Well, because they've been in power for so long already.
Absolutely. And so the impact of that cemented an image of the king as a fearless, divinely favored warrior, a reputation that resonated across the region. Sustained campaigning and border control. Fortified frontiers. He did, Ramesses II, and secured routes to Nubia for gold and resources. Preserved Egypt's standing as a major military power. The propaganda side of it, commissioned vast reliefs and temples. He built the Abu symbol depicting all of his victories. Turned military actions into a permanent narrative of dominance. As foreign relations, the first known peace treaty concluded a formal peace with the Hittites, often called the Egyptian Hittite Peace Treaty, one of history's earliest surviving treaties. Diplomatic marriage and alliance. So married a Hittite princess to solidify peace. The impact transformed a former rival into a longtime partner. So Ramesses didn't just fight wars; he redefined how power was projected. His legacy is a powerful lesson. Reputation is built not only on victory in battle, but on the ability to turn conflict into lasting stability.
100%, man. And part of his downfall, for one, Ramesses II definitely reigned for way too long. That affected a lot of things in Egypt, and he lied about everything.
Yes.
Huge. So propaganda has been going on for a long time. Mm-hmm. It's not something new in today's world. Mm-hmm.
This is true.
I actually was pretty surprised when I heard about that. When I was reading in the book about him making all those stories up about him fighting and killing that army. Mm-hmm. Like, I can't believe they actually did that. Mm-hmm. And they've put it in stone.
many moons ago. Many moons ago.
Wild. All right, so the last topic Haru gave us is Egypt and the Great Power Club of the Ancient Near East. So this section is important because it reminds us that Egypt was not operating in isolation.
That's right.
It was several major powers in the larger international world, and its influence depended on more than just its armies. The book presents Egypt as part of what is called the Great Powers Club of the Ancient Near East. So that included other major states like the Hittites, the Mitanni, and Babylonia. In that environment, power was constantly being negotiated. Military force still mattered, but diplomacy mattered too. So a kingdom could not just fight everybody all the time and expect to remain stable or respected. That is why treaties, royal marriages, and alliances were such a major part of the political landscape then. These were not just side details, they were central tools for the statecraft. One of the clearest examples in Egyptian Hittite treaty, which shows the even rival empires had to find ways to stabilize their relationships. So they wouldn't be fighting wars all the time. They wouldn't be able to survive that if they were constantly fighting each other. Diplomacy was definitely part of their power, not a substitute for it. So this section shows that the Egyptians' position depended on balance. To remain influential, it had to maintain the military credibility while also maintaining strategic relationships with its neighbors. If Egypt was strong but isolated, that created risk. If it was diplomatic but weak, that also created risk. So the real lesson here is that the great power status depended on a combination of force, negotiation, and long-term political intelligence. So in other words, Egypt's success in the ancient Near East was not just about conquest. It was about knowing how to operate in the world where multiple powerful states were all watching, bargaining, competing, and trying to survive all at the same time. So the question he gave us is, why was diplomacy important for Egyptians' position among other powers like the Hittite Empire.
So why did diplomacy matter for Egypt's great power success? So, as you just mentioned, in the late Bronze Age, Egypt operated in a crowded field of major states, most notably the Hittite Empire. Diplomacy became essential to maintain Egypt's position as a leading power. So, stabilizing a balance of power, neither Egypt nor the Hittites could decisively defeat each other. Diplomacy, treaties, recognition of spheres of influence created predictability, preventing constant war and preserving Egypt's status. Formal alliances reduced risk. The Egyptian Hittite peace treaty established non aggression, mutual defense clauses, extradition agreements. It turned a rival into a partner, lowering the chance of sudden conflict and freeing resources for eternal stability. Protecting trade and wealth. Diplomacy safeguarded economic lifelines, which underpinned Egypt's power. Securing frontiers indirectly, buffer zones, and recognized borders limited skirmishes. Egypt could defend its interests with fewer troops, avoiding costly campaigns. And as you just mentioned, the royal marriages built trust. Marriages between royal houses with Hittite princesses created kinship ties. Personal bonds reinforced treaties, making peace politically and symbolically binding. Diplomacy was crucial because it allowed Egypt to avoid exhausting wars with equal rivals, secure trade and prosperity, maintain influence without constant conquest, convert enemies into allies. Egypt stayed dominant not just by the sword, but by the art of negotiation and alliance building.
Yeah, man. So basically, in a world of rival empires, diplomacy was definitely a way to preserve their power, manage their conflict, and so they wouldn't have to fight every single battle outright.
That's right. That's right.
Right on, man. You got anything else for that?
No, that was good. That was real good.
All right. So move on to the next couple sections. This is what I was assigned in the book. I got 6 sections here. I'll go ahead and state them. Cultural changes in Egypt during the New Kingdom. Then we have the end of the New Kingdom, the Libyans and the Sea Peoples. Then we have the Meshwesh and Labu. And then the Libyans became pharaohs. And the last section I was assigned is Libyan origins of the site of the state 26th dynasty. And I summarized that into 3 topics. Let's start with the first one, the cultural changes in Egypt during the New Kingdom. So when we talk about the New Kingdom, we usually think about military power, famous pharaohs, giant temples, and Egypt at its peak. One of the most important things happening during this period was not just expansion outside of Egypt, but it was transformation inside of Egypt. So what stood out to me in this section is that the New Kingdom changed Egyptian life on a cultural and religious level in ways that affected more than just the ruling class. So one example is the growing importance of funerary beliefs in the text of like Book of the Dead. The book explains that it complains a collection of spells became more available to a broader part of the population. Before, most of the population didn't have access to these things, which meant that ideas about the afterlife were no longer just a narrow world concern. That matters because it shows religion becoming more widespread in everyday life, not just locked up in the palaces and temples. But another major shift was the architecture and public religion. So the New Kingdom moved away from the old pyramid tradition, and that was moved more towards like elaborate tombs and massive temple complexes. Places like Karnak, Luxor, they weren't just buildings, they were statements of power, religion, and public ceremony. So these temples became the central spaces for ritual processions, festivals, especially those connected to Amun. So Egypt wasn't just building bigger, it was reorganizing how religion looked, where it happened, and who it was meant to impress. So this section also shows that religion itself became more dynamic. New Kingdom Egypt saw the rise and prominence of major gods like Amun, Aten, and Seth. That tells us that Egypt's religion was not frozen in place. It adapted with the current politics, geography, and the leadership. Priests became more powerful, temples gained more wealth, and the religious life became more deeply tied to the state. So the big takeaway here is that the New Kingdom was not just Egypt at its strongest militarily. it was also Egypt reshaped culturally from the inside. Religion became more visible, more institutional, and more influential in daily life and political life. So that internal transformation helped make Egypt more powerful, but it also created structures that later became harder to hold together in the future. So the first question I got here is, do you think Egypt became stronger because religion and state were so tightly connected, or did that eventually make the kingdom more fragile?
I think it was a little bit of both, in my opinion, and I'll tell you why. So the power, what made Egypt stronger? The
I agree.
legitimacy of rule. The pharaoh was seen as a divine intermediary. His authority felt natural and unquestionable. They created social cohesion, shared belief in Maya, the cosmic order, which aligned society around one moral framework. There was administrative efficiency, motivation for large projects, and that stabilized civilization capable for enduring a millennia. Now, why could it weaken Egypt? Over dependence on one system. If religion was disrupted, politics and economy were disrupted as well. A crisis under reform, radical shifts like those of Akhenaten shook the entire state structure. Power struggles, resistance to change. Some strong traditions sometimes slowed adaptation to new political and external pressures. Egypt became powerful because religion and state were unified, but that same unity meant when belief was stable, Egypt was unshakable. When belief was challenged, the entire system trembled.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you base a system off of religion, it's going to fail in the end.
Yes, as we have seen time
I mean,
and time again.
religion can definitely unify people,
Sure.
but that usually only happens during a time when the people feel weak, right? And so they look outside of themselves to find a religion.
Yes,
Then they can all believe collectively in that, and
right.
boom, they become unified and powerful.
That's right.
But that belief in religion can never be, it's never sustained.
That's right. That's right.
You know, it hits a peak and then it falls.
And what's amazing is that it takes so much. There's so many different facets to for a kingdom to be successful. There is so many outlets, man, that it takes for a kingdom to be successful. And one thing, everybody has to be on the same page, pretty much.
That's the commonality between it. It's never about who's in control. It's
Right.
about, are the people working together?
Exactly.
And as soon as the people shift, you know, and that's why we have rulers that as Ramses II ruled way too long. And he's the one that, I mean, if it wasn't for, I mean, he made it, Egypt come to its peak, but he was also the reason why it fell, because he was just in there too long.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't let no young blood in there and have new ideas.
Well, some coaches, some ancient coaches, even before them, so they got to a point to where the kings, they only got to live a certain amount of time, and then after that, they were, I don't want to say executed, but they were done.
Disposed of.
Disposed of.
Yeah.
So you still have that will to live. So and it's happened a couple of times throughout the Egyptian history that when it's lived too long and it created such a distinction because he didn't have no survivors. But it is that so strange.
It goes back to change, like nature.
Right.
Nature changes, and so if one person's in power too long, that person wants to stay in power and he doesn't want to change anything, because if it changes, he'll lose power.
That's right.
And
that's right.
All right.
Power is powerful.
All right, man. So the next topic I got is the end of the New Kingdom, the Sea Peoples, and the Libyan pressure. I mean, this reading was it was a lot of information,
Mm-hmm.
but it went through just kingdoms one after another, after another.
Right.
So it's kind of hard to keep up with. But we'll start here. So the end of the New Kingdom, the Sea Peoples, and the Libyan pressure. In this topic, the Egyptian rising and transformation is where we start seeing the cracks in Egypt. The books makes it clear that the end of the New Kingdom was not caused by one single event. It was a long decline made worse by both internal weakness and external threats. That matters because people often want to dramatic a cause for collapse, dramatize it, but history usually is not that simple. Egypt just did not suddenly fall apart all at once. It was worn down. It was beaten down day in, day out. So one major issue was succession and leadership after long and powerful reigns, after we just got discussing like Ramesses II. A long reign can look like stability, but it can also create problems if the next generation is weaker or if power becomes harder to transfer cleanly. So the book points out that after Ramses the Great, Egypt had to deal with the growing foreign pressure at a time when it needed decisive leadership. This is where the Libyans and the Sea Peoples become so important. These were not just random border nuances. They were part of a larger regional crisis. The Sea Peoples especially are presented as a major destabilizing force in the Eastern Mediterranean world. The kingdoms were collapsing, migration and invasion were increasing, and Egypt was no longer operating in that old environment where it could assume control, right? So even when Egypt survived militarily, the pressure itself shows that the world around Egypt had changed. So the Libyans are also crucial here. At first, they appear as traditional enemies of Egypt on their western side, but the book shows that they become more serious over time, especially when they formed alliances and became organized. Egypt fought them, defeated them, recorded those victories, but they did not solve the deeper problem. The repeated conflict showed that Egypt was no longer facing one-time raids. It was facing a challenge, a changing balance of power. So maybe the most important point in the whole section is surviving a battle is not the same as preserving a civilization. Egypt won some victories, but the new kingdom still declined. Why? Because the pressure was constant. The state was weakening, and the old system was no longer enough to keep them together. So the end of the new kingdom was not just a military, it was structural. Egypt was still dangerous, but it was impressive, still capable of fighting back, but it was losing its ability to control the whole world around it like it usually did before. So the question I have is, do you think civilizations usually collapse because of outside enemies or because they become weaker internally first?
So I think it's, in my opinion, eternal weakening usually comes first, and the outside enemies finish the job. So, while the internal factors matter most, eroded illegitimacy. If people no longer trust the leaders or institution, coordination breaks down. Economic strain, debt, inequality, or disrupted trade hollows out the state capacity to pay armies and maintain infrastructure. There's political fragmentation, elite infighting. The state becomes brittle, strong looking, but easier to crack. External enemies actually do exploit those openings. The rivals attack when borders are thinly defended and alliances are weak. They accelerate the decline. War drains resources and exposes administrative failures. External pressure turns slow decline into rapid collapse. Classic patterns, overextension, strain equals defeat. Expansion outpaces administration, then a rival lands the decisive blow. Institutional breakdown, invasion, governance fails first, outsiders move in. And then you have the drought, plague, or trade collapse hits a system already under stress and enemies capitalize. Civilizations rarely fall only because of enemies. They fall when external strength no longer matches external pressure. And we see that, through the Egyptian legacy, the Old Kingdom, then they had the first intermediate period because they were weakened at that time. Then you had the Middle Kingdom, same thing. They started to weaken. Then you had the second intermediate period. Another attacker comes in, and the New Kingdom. It's the same thing. And it's beautiful. I mean, in the sense how that is expressed to what we're talking about. But you can see everything that we said, how they went through all those phases 3 times.
Exactly. 3 times. And we can see that, like you said, started from the middle. And everyone else on the outside, they've been begging and begging for years to get inside Egypt and control it.
Mm-hmm.
They just been chipping away and chipping away.
Mm-hmm.
And Egypt really never paid any mind, think, there's never going to be a problem. And then they were a problem.
And so there's also that level of complacency when you
Yes.
get too comfortable, thinking to everything you just said that nothing's ever going to happen. And that's when things tend to happen. You get somebody starts from the inside, you get too comfortable, you get fat and happy and living a good life. And it's just not to be that way all the time. Doesn't work that way.
There's always somebody hungrier.
Always somebody trying to get on your plate. Leave my food out.
All right, man. So let's move on to the last topic I have.
Okay.
Is from foreign enemies to pharaohs, the rise of the Libyans. And so this is probably the most fascinating part of the section for me because it shows a complete reversal in Egypt's political story. So the Libyans began as outsiders, enemies, and recurring threats to Egypt's borders. But over time, the book shows that groups like the Meshwesh and the Labu did not just keep fighting Egypt. They gradually entered Egyptian territory, settled, gained strength, and eventually became part of the political structure itself. That is a huge shift. Egypt went from resisting Libyan pressure to being ruled by Libyan descended kings. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But what makes this interesting is that the transition was gradual, not sudden. The book describes migrations, military conflicts, settlement in the Delta, and the rise of the Libyan local power. Over time, these groups became to establish in time these groups became to establish they were starting to become too strong to ignore anymore. Then eventually that means the political transformation of Egypt was just not about the invasion. It was about absorption, adaptation, and control from within. So when the Libyan became pharaohs, they did not simply erase Egypt and replace it with something completely foreign. That would be the lazy reading. What actually happened is it's definitely more complicated and more interesting. The Libyan rulers adopted Egyptian throne names. They used the Egyptian political language and worked to present themselves as legitimate pharaohs. So in other words, they ruled Egypt by entering Egypt's tradition, not openly rejecting it. Pretty smart, actually. And that is important in this section, that the Libyan origins of the Sayet, the 26th, which was the 26th dynasty. But by that point, the Libyan influence had gone so deep into Egyptian political life that it had become part of the system. Even when later rules tried to appear fully Egyptian, the book shows that the Libyan ancestor and the Libyan political influence had already shaped the course of Egyptian history. So the big takeaway here is that Egypt did not simply defeat or remove its foreign challengers. In this case, one of the challenging groups became integrated enough to take power. So they just kind of slowly dig in that hole. And the Libyans' first opponents, then settlers, and then they became the elites, and then the kings. They just constantly moved up to that step. So that arc says a lot about the history of Egypt in general. Sometimes the people at the edge of an empire do not destroy it. Sometimes they enter it, adapt to it, and end up ruling it. Yeah. So my question I have for this is, what do you think matters more for a ruler's legitimacy? Where they come from, or whether they can successfully take on the culture and role of leadership?
Okay, so I'll give a little bit of insight into both of those and then give an answer. So performance and cultural fluency usually matters more than origin, but origin sets the starting credibility and the sides of the hurdle a leader must clear. So why does origin matter? Instant recognition, lineage, place, and continuity give a ruler an immediate claim people understand. Ritual fit, many societies tie kingship to sacred ancestry. Elite acceptance, nobles and priesthoods often prefer one of their own. And so, why both performance and cultural adoption matter more, as you were just speaking on, about them integrating the Egyptian philosophies. Uh, Visual competence, security, justice, and prosperity are daily proofs of legitimacy. Cultural fluency, speaking the language of the people, ritually, symbolically, and administratively. Institutional alignment, working with existing elites, laws, and religious. A capable outsider who masters the culture can become fully legitimate, an inept insider can lose it. So, and I'll give you an example of this as well, to what you're talking about. So, during the 25th dynasty of Egypt, rulers like Paye and Shabaka were Nubian, but gained legitimacy by embracing Egyptian kingship ideas, Mayat, restoring temples and traditional cults, especially Amun, using Egyptian titles, language, and rituals. Their success shows that alignment with cultural expectations plus effective rule can outweigh birthplace. People may not accept where a ruler comes from, but they believe in how a ruler governs and how well they embody the culture.
Yeah, man, I think when it comes to the Libyans, when you look at it like in a broader sense, is
Hmm.
I think the Libyans kind of felt like Egypt was their big brother, and they were trying to be like them, and they were mad that Big Brother wasn't letting them in. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, and they
I mean,
all probably felt the
they were
way because of the
wannabes.
surrounding. That's right. Surrounding because Egypt was powerful. They ruled for a
Very
very
powerful.
long time. They ruled for
Very
a
long
very long
time.
time.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it's my turn. So I'll read off my chapters as well. So I had the ancient Nubia and its people, the Kerma culture, the Nubians during Egypt's New Kingdom. Let's see here, New Kingdom, the Nubian 25th dynasty, Nubian religion and culture, Nubian history, and the 25th dynasty. So I had several chapters there, and we'll try to get it all together there. So my first bullet point is a question. Egypt and Nubia are ancient cultures. What was Egypt's main purpose for wanting to conquer Nubia, and what profound parts did they both play biblically? So, Egypt's purpose for conquering Nubia was gold and wealth. Nubia was rich in gold, which equals Egypt's primary source of wealth and power. Trade control. Control trade routes connecting Central Africa to the Mediterranean. Military and security. Nubia served as a buffer zone protecting Egypt's southern border, prevented rival kingdoms from gaining power. Expansion of influence. Nubia equaled economic power plus strategic control. Egypt's profound biblical role, which you know is well versed in the Bible. They had the place of preservation. Joseph's rises in Egypt, saving his family from famine. Place of bondage. Israelites enslaved under Pharaoh equals their suppression. Place of deliverance. Moses leads Exodus, central story of freedom. So Nubia and Cush in the Bible, known as Cush, represents land south of Egypt, modern day Sudan, Ethiopia regions. Recognized power, key roles. Ruled by figures like Taharka. Cultural connection, Moses had a Cushite wife, which was a direct link. Part of the global biblical world mentioned in prophecies and historical accounts. Biblical theme for Cush equals strength, presence, and inclusion in world history. Egypt and Nubia were not peripheral, they were central to both history and the biblical narrative. Together, they show God works through powerful nations. No region is outside divine purpose, and Africa is fully present in both ancient history and scripture. So, my first question is, how does the relationship between Egypt and Nubia reflect the tension between domination and interdependence?
I think the relationship between Egypt and Nubia shows that the power between civilizations is rarely one sided. Egypt often tried to dominate Nubia through military control and political influence, especially because Nubia had major strategic value and important resources like gold.
Mhm.
But at the same time, Egypt also depended on Nubia through trade, regional access, and cultural contact. So even though Egypt may have held more power at certain points, that was never just a story of one side ruling the other,
Right,
simply existing underneath it.
right.
It was a relationship built on both control and dependence.
That's right.
And the tension is what makes it so important.
That's right. That's
They
right.
needed each other.
They did. They did. True power is often interdependent, not absolute. Civilizations grow not just through conquest, but through connection and exchange. That's right. They needed one another. They needed
I
one
mean, it kind of goes back to my ideas, a big brother and little
another.
brother.
Mm-hmm.
I
That's
mean,
right.
they hated each other, but they needed each other.
Absolutely. 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 All right. Bullet point number two. How did Ramesses II, 1279 to 1213 BCE, the Kerma culture, uh, Paye, 747, this is the king, 716 BCE, Shabaka, 716 to 702 BCE, who is considered the greatest of all 25th dynasty kings, and the title God's wife of a moon helped shape the 25th dynasty. So, Ramesses II, he expanded Egyptians' control deep into Nubia. He built monumental temples, promoted Amun worship, integrated Nubia into Egypt's political, economic, and religious system. The Kerma culture, one of the earliest powerful Nubian states, established indigenous African political and cultural systems, provided the deep Nubian identity and foundation behind the Kushite kings. Paye was the founder of the Kushite rule, turned Nubia into a conquering power over Egypt, launched the Kushite conquest of Egypt, defeated rival Egyptian rulers, and unified much of the Nile Valley. Shabaka, he fully consolidated Kushite control over Egypt, revived ancient Egyptian traditions, texts, and religious practices. He was the stabilizer and architect of the dynasty's identity, blended Kushite power with Egyptian tradition, religious power, and legitimacy. So the title God's wife of Amun were held by royal women. They controlled the powerful Amun priesthood in Thebes, managed vast temple wealth and influence, provided religious legitimacy, political control, and economic power in Upper Egypt. The 25th dynasty was a fusion of Nubian strength and Egyptian tradition, built on centuries of interaction, influence, and shared culture. A moment where Africa, Kush, didn't just interact with Egypt, but ruled it. So, my question is for the second bullet point: what does the 25th dynasty's revival of older Egyptian traditions suggest about the role of the past in shaping the future?
I'd say the 25th dynasty shows that in the past is not just something people. It's not the past is not something people leave behind.
Mhm,
It can also be something that they reach back in order to restore order.
mhm,
Um, we do it today. We look back in history to learn, right?
mhm,
So when Nubia rulers revived older Egyptian traditions, they were not just doing it to imitate the past or glorify it. They were using it to strengthen their rule and connect themselves to a respected vision of Egyptian kingship. That suggests that the past can serve as a foundation for renewal. In other words, looking back is not always a step away from progress. Sometimes it's exactly how a society finds its way forward.
mhm.
And that's what we're doing here. That's what this podcast is all about on Sundays. We're about learning about history and how can we learn from it and make
Absolutely.
ourselves better.
Absolutely. Great point. Great point. Great point. Okay. Bullet point number 3: Egypt and Nubia coexisted side by side, one north, one south. They were different and yet the same, religiously, linguistically, and kingship wise. How did these philosophies intertwine both cultures, and what impact did that have on both civilizations in the future? So, Egypt and Nubia, identity shared but distinct. Egypt and Nubia were separate civilizations with unique origins, yet they shared religion, language systems, and kingship ideas. Cultures can absorb and reshape influences without losing themselves. Identity is both individual and relational. Power and the sacred. Kingship in both cultures was divinely connected. Rulers were expected to uphold the cosmic order and spiritual balance. Power required moral and religious legitimacy, not just force. True power must be aligned with higher purpose. Culture and ownership. Egyptian language, religion, and governance influenced Nubia. Cultural ideas were shared, not owned permanently by one group. Civilization is inherited, adapted, and re expressed over time. Egypt at times ruled Nubia, later, Nubia ruled Egypt. Their relationship was not one sided, it evolved over time. Long term interaction created mutual influence and shared destiny. Interdependence shapes history more than domination. Egypt and Nubia proved that cultures are not fixed, they are fluid and evolving. Influence is not one sided, it is reciprocal. True power comes not just from conquest, but from understanding, adapting, and integrating ideas. They were different, but through shared beliefs and systems, they became part of one continuous now civilization. So, my question is: how does the adoption of language, ritual, and kingship from one culture by another challenge the idea of ownership in civilization?
I mean, I think it challenges that idea because civilization is almost never built in isolation.
Mm,
When one culture adopts the language, rituals, and political forms of another, it shows that that culture is not always something people can claim in a rigid or exclusive way. So, in the case of Nubia and Egypt, the Nubian rulers did not just borrow Egyptian traditions on the surface. They stepped into those traditions and gave them continued life in a new historical way.
mhm,
Um, so that tells us civilization is often shaped through exchange, adaptation, and continuity across different peoples. So instead of thinking in terms of ownership alone, it makes more sense to think in terms of influence, inheritance, and transformation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, to add to that, there's a saying that goes, history leaves clues. And, the Libyans and the Nubians address that by integrating, going back to the older kingdoms and integrating the old traditions and philosophies to integrate themselves into not just to the least, but as we talked about, the masses absolutely matter, and they needed that to be legitimate pharaohs when they ruled Egypt at that time. Um, Great king.
100%. You're right.
It's a great podcast. Great podcast right there. I love
It would have been greater. I did definitely miss Haru today.
Absolutely. It's something to have all our voices on here at the same time, discussing these things. It certainly is a shared and respectful time, man. And I'm with you as well in that sentiment.
I can't wait to get a King Corey back too.
Absolutely. It is something to have all four of us on here, and eventually that will happen. I'm hoping, and I think it will.
We did have one person in the chat. Jennifer Parrish reached out. She said, 100% agree. Right on. I don't know what we agreed with, but right on. I'm glad you agree with us.
That's right. I'm glad you said something. Yeah, no doubt about that too as well.
It's good to have you here.
Absolutely. We King Maggie did the spotlight for the beautiful people, and unfortunately we do not have that this week. Sorry about that, but we will definitely get that on Tuesday. And also too, I apologize. We apologize that we moved the time to noon on Sundays instead of doing it at 9:15 at Sunday night later on tonight. So my apologies for that, for not mentioning that or putting that out ahead of time. But from moving forward, this will be our time at noon on Sundays at this time right here. So it'll be great. Any last words, King?
Yeah, I want to end with our 3 pillars of success.
Wait, hold on. Let me say this. So before he does that, we encourage you, all of you. We are on. We're coming to Facebook real soon, but we're on Spotify, Deezer, Apple Podcasts, Riverside FM. We're on YouTube as well right now. If you can't see these handsome faces, surely yes indeed, plug us into that auxiliary card in your car and listen to these amazing voices that we are bringing to you. It's been a beautiful day, great podcast, and we'll have everybody back here soon. You got it, King.
All right. Tuesday nights when we'll be back here again at 9:15 for open mic night. And let's end with our 3 pillars of success. First one is faith. Trust in your own power, believe deeply in your purpose, build unshakable confidence through action. Second pillar is dedication. Show up when no one's watching. Stand firm in your commitment to grow. Put in the reps mentally, physically, and daily. And the last pillar, discipline. Forge your character through consistency. Set your code and follow it without compromise. Control your impulses. Command your results. Out.